Snowflakes fell heavy against the cracked window panes of Margaret Whitlow's farmhouse. At 72, she was used to winters in Montana, but this storm was different. The wind howled like wolves, rattling the old barn doors. Margaret lived alone now, ever since her husband George passed 5 years ago. Her children had long moved to cities far away. The stormy silence reminded her of just how big and lonely the house could feel. But that night, loneliness wasn't all that knocked on her door. At around 9 p.m., headlights cut through the blizzard. Engines roared, 15 of them, before sputtering to silence outside her driveway. Moments later, heavy boots crunched through the snow toward her porch. Margaret opened the door, clutching her shawl, and froze. Before her stood 15 men, leather jackets dusted with snow, tattoos climbing up their necks, beards stiff with frost. Their leader, tall with steel-gray eyes, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his voice respectful but tired. "The storm caught us on the highway. We can't make it to town. Could we, just for tonight, get shelter in your barn?" Margaret's heart pounded. She had seen enough news stories about biker gangs, trouble, violence, crime. And here were 15 of them at her door. Her instincts screamed to shut the door. But then she looked closer. Their hands were red with cold. One limped as if injured. Another younger one, barely 20, shivered so hard his teeth chattered. They weren't dangerous in that moment. They were human. Margaret's voice trembled as she said, "The barn will be colder than you think. If you promise no trouble, you boys come inside. A storm like this shows no mercy." The men exchanged glances. Their leader removed his cap, nodded deeply, and said, "You have our word." And just like that, 15 bikers stepped into the warm farmhouse of one kind old widow. The farmhouse kitchen, usually so quiet, came alive. The bikers crowded around the wooden table, steam rising from their clothes as snow melted off. Margaret bustled about, pulling out loaves of bread, jars of soup, and the last of her apple preserves. She muttered, "Didn't plan for a crowd this big." But her hands never stopped working. Soon, bowls of hot stew were passed around, and the bikers, men with intimidating tattoos and calloused hands, ate with the manners of hungry boys. As they warmed, they began to talk. The leader introduced himself as Ronan Kane, president of a motorcycle club called the Iron Hawks. His men, he explained, weren't outlaws. They were veterans, mechanics, truck drivers, men who found brotherhood on the road. One by one, Margaret learned their names. Diesel, with a booming laugh. Patch, who had lost an eye in Afghanistan. Tyler, the youngest, riding with them to escape a broken home. Each story peeled away the rough exterior, revealing human hearts underneath. First, Margaret spoke little, just listening. But when Tyler asked about the photos on the mantle, she found herself sharing stories of George, of their farm, of her children who visited less and less. The bikers listened, truly listened. By midnight, laughter filled the farmhouse. Diesel was fixing a creaky cabinet door. Patch chopped wood for the fire. Tyler washed dishes, humming a tune. Margaret, for the first time in years, felt her house alive again. Before bed, Ronan approached her. "Ma'am, we'll sleep on the floor by the fire. You've done more than enough." Margaret smiled softly. "I raised 3 boys. Trust me, 15 more won't break me." That night, as the storm raged outside, Margaret lay awake. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt safe, strangely safe, as if the house, once so empty, was protected by the very strangers she once feared. The storm broke by dawn. Sunlight glistened on snowdrifts that buried fence posts halfway. Margaret rose early, expecting the bikers to be gone quickly, eager to get back on the road. But when she stepped outside, her breath caught in her throat. Lined up along her driveway, engines gleaming in the snow, were not 15 bikes, but nearly 100. Riders in black leather stood beside them, helmets tucked under arms. The Iron Hawks hadn't left. They had called their entire brotherhood. Margaret's knees weakened. "What on earth?" Ronan stepped forward, his voice steady but warm. "Word spread fast last night. You opened your home when you didn't have to. You treated us like men, not monsters. So today, every hawk within riding distance showed up. Not for trouble. For you. Margaret blinked back tears. For me. Yes, ma'am, Ronan said. This house needs work. That barn needs patching. Your fences are broken. We saw it last night. You've been alone too long. So today, the hawks ride for you. And before Margaret could protest, the roar of engines filled the air as bikers set to work. Some shoveled snow. Others hammered loose boards. Tyler repainted shutters. Diesel repaired her broken roof tiles. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, jaws dropping at the sight. 100 bikers swarming an old farmhouse, not to terrorize, but to heal. By midday, the place looked better than it had in years. Margaret stood on the porch, tears streaking her weathered face, whispering, "George would have loved this." Ronan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Family comes in unexpected ways, ma'am. You gave us warmth last night. Today we give it back." The sun dipped low, turning the snow pink and gold. The bikers gathered for one last meal around Margaret's table, now overflowing with food neighbors had brought once they saw what was happening. Margaret looked around at the sea of leather jackets, patched vests, and weathered faces. Men's society often judged, now sitting in her home like sons she never knew she had. When it was time to leave, Ronan spoke for them all. "You'll never spend another storm alone, Mrs. Whitlow. The Iron Hawks ride for you now. Anytime, anywhere. You just call." Tyler pressed a necklace into her hand, a silver pendant shaped like a hawk. "So you remember us," he said shyly. Diesel saluted her with tears in his eyes. Patch hugged her gently, whispering, "You gave us a home, ma'am. That's something even war never did." Margaret could only whisper, "Thank you, all of you." The engines roared to life, one by one, until the ground trembled. 100 bikes thundered down the country road, fading into the horizon. That night, Margaret sat by the fire, pendant clutched in her palm, her heart fuller than it had been in years. She had thought kindness was a small thing, just letting strangers in from the cold. But she learned kindness, when given freely, multiplies. It turns strangers into family, fear into trust, and a lonely farmhouse into a beacon of hope. And in her quiet home, Margaret whispered into the flames, "I'm not alone anymore."